Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to our panel on how to communicate Europe more or less a year ahead of the European elections. So I will just give a very short introduction, and then you will have all time to listen to our speakers, and I'm very happy to welcome them, and I will shortly introduce them to you. So you have Rima, Juju, Deljkic, no, yeah? I practiced the whole morning, but it was not enough, from the representation of the European Commission in Zagreb in Croatia. Then you have Jukka, Niva from Finland, from television over there in Finland, so journalist. And then you have two MEPs, so members of the European Parliament, one coming from this country, Italy, Marco Affronte over there, and then you have Eickhout from the Netherlands. So we would like to discuss today and in these 1 hour and 15 minutes how we can communicate Europe, because as you all know, it's not the topic where people are naturally interested in when it comes to the European elections in general. Interest is very low in most of the member states. Also the turnout is lower than in national elections. And when I prepared the panel, I was just realizing that I was getting very old, because when I did my master thesis, I had already this question: how can we generate a kind of European public space? How can we raise the interest for European politics in the different member states? And I realized that was 16 years ago. And we basically still ask ourselves the same questions, and I don't have the impression that much has improved back then. It's perhaps even getting more complicated, because on the one hand, the European project is not considered anymore like just a great project everywhere. There's much more Euroscepticism in the member states. And on the other hand, also reporting is getting much more difficult in some of the member states. So that is more or less the setting we are in now. And it would be great if at the end of this session we could have some nice and innovative ideas how, on the one hand, the media, but also on the other hand, the European institutions could improve the communication to raise the interest and get more people interested in European politics. So, first of all, the speakers will have 3 minutes, I said, let's see if they respect it, to make a short statement as an introduction, and then we start with the questions. And I would say, as soon as you have a question, just raise your hand and we make it as interactive as possible. So, first perhaps Rima, if you can, yeah. Rima, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really, really a pleasure for me to be here. I think that the microphone is working fine. Again, my name is Rima Deljkic. I come from a small office of the European Commission in the capital city of the newest member state in the EU, which is Croatia. I'm a press officer, and I've been a press officer in this office for the last 2 years. And it's been a great challenge, actually, to communicate the European projects to Croatians who have been faced with a lot of political and economic and financial challenges in the country. So the topic, how do we communicate Europe before the elections and after the elections and during the entire cycle is, sorry, it's fine. It's always a relevant question. I don't think it will ever come out of the agenda. We need to always think about how to improve our communication with the general public, actually how to engage with the general public, how to get their interest. And there is no one simple answer. And to me, when I think of it a bit deeper, it's actually back to the basics. So yes, the technologies are very much have improved. The platforms have increased in numbers, but again and again, the main point are the citizens and the communication towards them and feedback from them. So two-way communications. This is in short from me for the start, and then I leave the floor to other colleagues.
Then I would say, let's go to Jukka. From the journalistic Finnish point of view, with some nice experiences you had, I think, for the last European elections.
Hi everyone, my name is Jukka. I'm from the Finnish state broadcaster YLE, and I'm the head of our news news lab, and I was responsible for our election coverage in the last Euro elections of 2014. And for media, European Union and especially the EU elections are somewhat problematic, as you may know. They feel distant and boring, which was a dream come true for us. Because in a situation like that, you can really start to experiment on different things. Traditionally, all the elections go in a certain way. On TV, you have a party chairman and the top candidates debating, and like it has always been since the 1960s. What we did last time was to turn things upside down. We had all the Finnish Euro candidates, all 240 of them, in one-to-one election debate. We arranged 240 election roasts or debate before the elections, made highly shareable stuff with all the candidates, with candidates that were really good, with candidates that didn't even know the difference between Commission and the Parliament. And what it created was a more value-based election debate before the Finnish Euro elections, because you had so many people from so many backgrounds telling us what they want to make of EU. And what happened was that in 7 days it took 1 million views in a nation with 5 million citizens. So it was a huge hit, this boring election. And what we decided 30 minutes after the election closed, that we will do this again next year, and we will do much more radical experimental stuff. So Euro elections, being boring, are just the perfect spot for news houses to experiment on anything.
So I hope we can go a bit deeper into it later. Let's go a bit further south again to Bas from the Netherlands, and then we move to Italy.
I thought you would go to Italy. Yeah. Compared to Finland, Netherlands is south, that's true. Well, I would say, when you said Euroscepticism, it's more difficult to have a debate on Europe now. I would say, and this is also for debate, right? I would say, thank God there is now Euroscepticism. I think what was a long problem in Europe, there was no oxygen in the political debate. It was just Europe is there, no one really knows what it is, but it's there and it's good. And that was it. That's not a way to attract people to political elections. People want to know at the political level what's going on and what are the political differences. And I think too long at the European level it was unclear where the political fight was. Because trust me, in Brussels you have the same political fights between left-wing and right-wing politicians as you have in national capitals. Sometimes the topics are a bit further away, a bit more longer term, so more difficult maybe. But in the end, there is always a difference in vision on how you see the society and how you want to form that. And that's the political dimension that is hardly ever seen when we are talking about European politics. I think when people think of European politics, you think of buildings. If you think of national politics, you think of people. And I think that's the core of the problem. As long as we think of buildings and institutions, then of course you can't expect people to get enthusiastic about European elections. And I think this is really one of the challenges also for the politicians, to make it more political, to make it more personal, to make it more clear where the political differences are. However, and then we go now to the next step that we need to take, and that is, of course, Euroscepticism. It brought oxygen in the debate, but it also made it debate very, well, one-dimensional. You're either in favor of the EU or you are against. And that's, I think, now we really have to come to the level that being critical on what's going on in Europe doesn't necessarily mean you are anti-European. And I think there also you have a bit of a generational issue. I'm now acting for 9 years in the European Parliament, and quite a lot of my older colleagues, they quite often immediately translate criticism in the EU into you are anti-EU. And of course, as long as that is your attitude, you give all the freedom of criticism to the real anti-Europeans. They are the only ones having a kind of a monopoly on critics on European politics. And as long as you give that monopoly to them, of course you will not have a good political discussion. So we have to go beyond that one-dimensional one. I think their social Europe will be one of the key things that I would say, but we can go back into the debate on that, but that would be at least my opening statement.
Thank you. And then we go to Italy, where communication on elections is also pretty difficult, I would say. So, Marco, what is your take?
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, it's easy for me to refer to the last Italian elections, also because they are fresh in our mind, and also because many people, me included, thinks that they were the worst electoral campaign ever. We didn't discuss about content, we didn't discuss about team issues, that there were just dogs barking at each other. So for sure, facing a new European campaign, a new European election, we need a stronger communication. And I would say that we need it at two different levels. The first level, and I agree with the second speaker, I don't remember your name, is at the basic level to explain people how the European Union works in some way. I can agree also with Bas, but I still need that we have to explain more about the functioning of the European institution. Not only what is the difference from between the European Parliament and the European Commission, but how the process works to have some kind of new legislation, new directive, new regulation. Because if we are not doing so, we leave the room for politicians like Italian politicians that usually say is European fault. Someone like in the space in Brussels decided about this, woke up in the morning and say we need a new piece of law, we need a new directive. It's not like this. It's a result of a process of a discussion, political discussion. Sometimes the discussion lasts for 1 year within the European Parliament. And it's a discussion, it's a democratic discussion, it's a political discussion that brings some piece of new legislation. And in this discussion, Italy is not something like looking like there, is in the discussion because we have politicians, Italian politicians also in the European Parliament, and yet they have to participate and sometimes also participate to this kind of discussion. So, of course, we need more knowledge about this functioning, and the responsibility is on the educational system in Italy, is on the politician. Just a brief indent, just to say that usually for the Italian politician, the European Parliament is something like where to push old politicians to go die, like an old elephant. Oh, it's not useful in it, so let's bring it to Brussels to die somewhere else. It's like this. For the kids in Italy, so, and also part of the responsibility in order to bring this basic knowledge is on the media. The media, of course. The second level is just an hope for me, and I would like that the communicator here can say something about this. We need the help of the media, we need the help of the communicator to bring issues, to bring topics in the political agenda, in the political discussions. In the last electoral campaign, we didn't hear anything about topics like climate change, the consequences of climate change, the interlink, the relation between climate change and migration. We talk a lot about migration, but just like these people moving just for vacancy and not because there are because of real problem. The entire labor market is changing, and I want to have discussion on this. I want to have it in the political agenda. I want to have it in the political discussion. So the media cannot let the politician to say whatever they want or they bark at each other. We need that they bring the discussion in some direction to have answer from them, so the people can decide what answer is better for their feeling, for what they think or what they say. So we need a strong media to have a strong communication, and we can do it. We have a year before the next European campaign, so we can do better for sure.
Thank you. Well, already in your statements, I think you see also that in the different countries it seemed to be a different situation. You say that you have to educate people, Bas said you have to talk more about topics and about the differences in the parliament. Jukka brought some examples from Finland, and Rima also was saying, yeah, we still need to explain a lot in Croatia. So perhaps we can go a bit deeper there. Would we need to have the same approach all over Europe? Can we have different approaches in the countries? And what would be for you the most important things to communicate on, or ways to communicate? So is it really about topics? Is it about explaining how the institutions work? Is it a mix of all of them? So what should we do? What are your thoughts? Who wants to start?
So Marco actually referred to the media, the importance of the media in communicating Europe. I just wanted actually to give you a feedback on how the media in Croatia, their attitude before the accession. So Croatia will, in June, will be the 5th year of Croatia's accession to the European Union. The mood and the attitude of the media before accession was so proactive. They were so hungry for every news of the EU. It was a strategic goal for the country to join. And then the moment we joined, it somehow stopped. Even the public TV, you know, we had shows on the EU, political shows, political magazine, where we were informed, where the public was informed on a regular basis what was happening. And then after that, and I asked the editors-in-chief, how come? Well, their reply was, well, now we are a member state. We don't need those political magazines on the EU. I said, maybe it's quite on the contrary, no? Don't you think so? So now it's a real difficult job, day in, day out, to work with the editors-in-chief and the media and the journalists to provide them with the information, and not only with the information. Actually, for a start, they want a final product that they can only place. And then, so you have to take it from scratch, and then bit by bit, build on this. Now we have a lot of commissioners, actually tomorrow coming to Croatia. Vice President Katainen is coming. Commissioner Sir King, so the Security Union, and our own commissioner, the Croatian commissioner, is coming. All three in one day, and all the media are doing interviews with them. So again, we started as if from scratch from the day we joined, and building bit by bit on the national, regional, and local level. And it is hard work. It's, again, on a daily basis.
I would say this confirms a bit that why was it interesting before the accession? Because there was still a political gain to achieve, right? There is a kind of a political goal being part of it, and that indeed is it. That's much more interesting. The problem is that indeed, and I always find it difficult. We will get to the role of journalists, but I always find it a bit difficult to put a kind of a lot of responsibility in the corner of the journalists, because I think in the end of it starts with the responsibility of the politicians also. And I think we as politicians have too long just let Europe be that one where you want to be part of, and once you are part of it, then suddenly the political dimensions are out of it, as if it's a kind of a faceless bureaucracy where you can become part of, which is interesting when you're not, but once you're part of it, okay, then the politics is out of it. I think that's the problem, and that's something that you're not going to solve by explaining. And this is a bit also the attitude of the professional units of the European Parliament, who are always thinking of how can we sell the European Parliament. I think as soon as a political organization needs to think about selling itself, then you have a big problem, I would say. then there is really something wrong. Because you don't need to sell, you have to show what kind of politics is going on. And of course, there, the journalists should be critical towards the politicians. Just one example, in the Netherlands, we have a prime minister who is great in pretending as if everything is a nature law, that what he is standing for, that you can't be against, because that's normal, right? So on economics, it's also like he's talking about comparing European economic politics. He's comparing that as if you're doing your own household at home. And of course you can't spend more than you have in your wallet. As if the governance, the economic governance of a state, of a European Union, is comparable with what you're doing at home. But by doing that, he's sucking all the political energy out of the debate, and people think, oh yeah, he's right. Whereas, of course, that's a totally political decision what you do with Eurozone budget, yes or not. And there is a political fight behind. So don't let yourself drawn into kind of an apolitical technical debate. You have to challenge that politically. And then it doesn't matter that people don't know the exact difference between Commission and Parliament and Council. Because if you ask people back home, do you really know the difference between a second chamber, a first chamber, or in Germany between the Bundesrat and the Bundestag? They also are far less deeply into that than we think. But there it's not a problem, and with Europe we always think, oh, it's difficult, so we need to know it. If that's our attitude, it's good to do that 4 years long, but not during an election campaign, I would say. Discussion. Political discussion. Yeah.
Since this is a discussion, I should say that I strongly disagree. Instead, I say I totally agree.
Shoot.
Yeah. Bringing back politics would be really great and would make the work of media a lot easier and a lot better. In addition to that, media is not the only media. And that is a huge question inside Europe, but in everything you can just imagine, thanks to digitalization. We have politicians, we have great, interesting guys having 200,000 followers on Twitter. That's bigger than a circulation of a newspaper. So where's the media exactly? And the way I see it is that when we cover European Union, we, and now I'm painting a black and white picture in it, we have only one target group in mind, people that are interested in politics. We should have another target group, people that don't give, pardon my French, give a shit about politics, are not interested, but the decisions that are made in Brussels affect their lives. And how we make those stories that they don't have to spend time with stories about Europe. They just need to know that this affects me. And I'm not talking about stories that are close to normal human being or something like that. I'm talking about content that could be used within 7 seconds. Because we are competing of citizens' time. Our greatest competitor might be Red Bull or I don't know who pushes content here. So what if we just lack a totally new form of journalism, the journalism that takes only 7 seconds and just makes you understand what just affected you?
But everybody says that Europe is so complicated, so how could you put that in 7 seconds? Is that the moment where I say discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, but I mean, it is a bit the thing, because I can completely see what you are saying, but I also see the point that, for example, Marco made, that it's so complicated and that people first need to understand how it works, and then you say, no, I want to have 7 seconds. So for me, it seems to be really complicated to put that all together. But Marco wanted to say.
The different target groups. If you have people that are not interested in that at all, you have to start from somewhere. And then just hope that people get interested, that, okay, they make decisions that affect me. Okay, how does it work?
Marco.
I would like just to say that, okay, when I said it's also responsibility of the media, mine was like a crying for help, because we need help, because I'm facing this kind of situation. I would like to face people, citizens, electors, and I want to talk with them, to confront with other politicians in front of them, using my best tool, that is content. And the other one sitting beside me is like, boom, stop migration, bang, and help them at home, bang. So I understand that communication has changed a lot, and I understand that this has to be more centered on a political level, on a political discussion. But I mean, I don't know at least how to use this kind of new instrument, and maybe it's not up to me to understand exactly how to use this kind of tools. Maybe I want that the communicators put me at the same level and give me the same instrument to me and to the other politician that goes in another moves to another level. I don't know if I'm explaining well. I mean, I'm here. I need to say something. I need to explain how to reach a decision, to have a political decision, and the other one say just is Europe fault. How can discuss with this one? How can I, if you communicator don't help me to have a level playing field to discuss with these people? So that's why I said responsibility of the media, just to say, please help us to have a more constructive discussion, and help us to play in the same arena with these people that are very smart, very, very fast, but of course they lack, in my opinion, content. They lack substance, if I can say so.
Just one quick thought. When you say political debate, again, I have to refer to my own country. The Croatian citizens are actually extremely tired of political debates. They not only do not want to engage, but they don't want to. They are actually bitter, angry, frustrated. So when you offer political debate to them, it all depends on how will you discuss whatever topic. It's not only a heated debate that will make things more interesting for the citizen. If it's something indeed that concerns them directly, then yes. But for instance, again, tomorrow in our parliament, there is a debate on the Istanbul Convention, and there's been a very heated debate on the political level, and people are really tired of it. So again, it will all depend on the content and whether it concerns them directly and whether it affects their lives directly. So it is tricky. And when you say your prime minister is comparing the budget of the government budget to his household budget, I think in simplifying, because we always try to simplify our narrative so that we can get to the citizens, because it's complex, it is tricky. So maybe it fires back sometimes. So, you know, it's all a bit of, a bit simplifying and then a bit going deeper to inform and to explain how the institutions functions. And yes, of course, I do agree with you that it needs to be political. Actually, President Juncker said that the Commission needs to be more political. Oh, yeah. Now that you've mentioned the political debate.
Let's not start.
We don't need this debate, I think.
No, but yes, there is a point, of course. I mean, otherwise it is all about buildings. It's all about procedures. There is no face to it, and there is no relationship with the citizens.
Well, and even the faces we have, they are not known in the member countries, so that adds an extra difficulty. But Jukka, what would be for you a kind of, what would you say you would need from the politicians or from the institutions to make great content about Europe? What would be for you a dream delivery?
would say that bringing back the politics would be just the traditional only way, because, like you said, selling it just somehow doesn't make it, even though that it's really important that people are explained how things work, because it's really hard to understand how Europe works. So it's really necessary to do that, but bringing back the values, that what kind of continent would we like to have together? That's what it's all about.
So are there already questions in the public? Then we could, yeah, please.
Thank you. Really interesting topic. At some point, you mentioned the need from media, and we have an example from Finland, that they have the obligation to portray it, to talk about it, to restrain European elections. What I think is going on is that there is not only a lack of willing from the media to cover the kind of election because they're politically considered as inferior as a national, but for me there is a lack of European public sphere. And I wanted to know what is your point about it, because if we consider in terms of media, for example, there is the example of Euronews. Euronews is there, exists, kind of like overcome the language barrier, but still some scholars consider it a failure in terms of media success. What do you think about it?
We come to that question of a European sphere, right? It's nice. No. It's you end up quite often in that question. I think really it matters on how you define that, right? I think the idea that we can create some kind of European media that is covering topics throughout all the entire continent, stop it. I don't believe in it. I really don't believe that is achievable, maybe on a very long term, but just the cultural differences, the settings in the debates are so different. You need national media who understands that national context and gives them their coloring of the issues. So I'm not a believer. I mean, you have a couple of things in Europe, of course, in the EU bubble, which is very informative for the ones working in the EU bubble, but it's not really attracting the people outside. I think the only one that can deliver a bit of it is Financial Times, but that's for a very professionalized audience that is already globalized itself, so to say. But normal people don't read Financial Times. That's a quote. That's a quote. I don't know whether do I insult someone now. It's but I do think that there are very clearly topics that people are concerned about in the same countries all over the place. Everyone is talking about refugees and migration. Everyone in Europe, everyone is now talking about what's going on in Syria. Everyone is talking about it with a different context maybe, but everyone is talking about it. And I'm pretty sure that also in the elections you can make European topics where people talk about. Like I said, for me, it is about social Europe, that we have the problem in Europe that you have one internal market where companies can freely, they can pick and choose their employees, they can go everywhere, but then taxation is still national. It's a heaven for companies. Everyone understands that is a problem, because we see that the taxation of companies is going down, and then of course governments need to get it from somewhere else, so they hire the taxation on labor or consumption. VAT is going up everywhere. That is a problem that people understand, and people understand that there's somewhere Europe, it's also on migration. When you say, what do I say to people who say, I don't want migration and it's the fault of Europe? I think the biggest mistake is to say, no, it's not the fault of Europe. You can say, yes, it is the fault of Europe. Because the problem is that we are not solving it together. Also there we're doing it halfway. We created one internal Schengen area, but at the same time do national policies on refugees. That's stupid. But that's how we arrange it. So attack that and challenge those people that say, I don't want them. Okay, but how are you going to arrange it? And quite often all the polls show that people understand that you need to do that at the European level. People understand that, so don't shy away. And I think it's most of the politicians that are wrong, that are so afraid of the voters that all their advisors say, don't talk about Europe, because it's not popular. And you see all these politicians, okay, I'm not going to talk about Europe. Yeah, of course, then it will never get popular. And here you can learn one lesson of Macron. We can talk very long about it, and no, I'm not a fan of him, but he did one thing right. He didn't listen to his advisors that said, don't talk about Europe. Because everyone in France said, it's killing if you talk about Europe. And he did it. He talked about Europe. So maybe that's another thing. Maybe politicians should listen less to their advisors and more to their own heart. Maybe.
Okay, so there is a European space.
And that's a debate in the European space, I would say.
So, European space of topics, yes, but no European media in a way. Are there other opinions on this on the panel?
I would like just to add something on what Bas said, because be careful, because it's true that there are some topics, of course, that are concerned for all the European countries, and migration is one of these. But be careful, because when you say to people from Netherlands, yes, is Europe's fault, they react like, okay, open the discussion, improve this kind of process, work better. If you do the same in Italy, they say, it's Europe's fault, let's go out of the Europe. The reaction is very, very different on this.
Can I react just immediately? Because I think it's a key concern, and it's right. Currently, the support for Europe is so vulnerable that we have this problem. But I think if we shy away from it, we maintain that problem, that any criticism immediately becomes quite of a fundamental problem of the EU. The problem is that until now, the ones who said we blame Europe also immediately said, and we want to get out. As if that is the only taste, if that's the only game in town. And I think the stupidest reaction of us would be like, okay, now I'm not going to criticize because then I will be part of that going out, because then you keep the only option for being critical is going out. And I think we need to create a new dimension that is, you can be critical, but very pro-European critical. I think that dimension needs to be developed. And that's not easy, I'm not saying that, but I think it's crucial if we want to make Europe survive.
I know, I would like just to say that how difficult it is to be critical on Europe and to be pro-Europe in Italy. Just to say
but
this.
That's a problem. That's a problem.
And also, okay, I want to go too far, but this kind of discussion, this kind of path brings to the decision of Italy to do an agreement with Libya. That is terrible, it's something very, very terrible. And the people clap on this. So this is the situation. That's why I'm saying, of course, the situation, of course, the European Union is one single European Union, but the situation is very, very difficult. It depends on what part of the Europe, of course.
Before going to the next question, I just wondered, is there an agreement on the panel that these European media, they don't really work?
I actually don't agree, I have to say. I mean, you mentioned Euronews. I think that they have their values. It's a complementary media. It's not the only one, but it is complementary. And the way further is actually to give Euronews in different languages. And this is what the citizens are asking. Euronews in Polish, Euronews in Croatian. So we do have correspondence of Euronews in all, maybe in all capitals, but not even. So this is maybe the way forward, to get more correspondence around the European Union and candidate countries and give it a local language. This could be one option, and then to explore more. And we keep talking about migration, how it is the biggest challenge of the decade. I mean, yes, of course it's complex, of course it's very difficult. And the problem is, which is natural, that the citizens want solutions. They don't want the debate. They are not interested in the debate. They want a solution, a ready solution overnight. This is the problem. This is the challenge, I think.
You mentioned Euronews, and what if the Euronews would air more kind of union criticizing debates?
Absolutely.
And get out of the bubble and just would be the sphere where you can criticize and fight about it. Should we stay together or not? Bring back the politics again.
I would like to know how many people here knows the European media and use the European media. How many people here knows that there is a Euronews or so the dedicated political, for example, or dedicated media from Europe? I'm asking to you because
all of them.
There is hope.
Exactly.
I'm not sure this is a representative.
No, but maybe not.
Of course.
Yeah, it's more the FT Euronews public. So. I saw another question here.
Thank you very much. Helen Derbyshire from Access Info Europe. Thanks for this it's very important debate, this one. I have a two-part question, one about part about transparency, one about languages. Bas, you said it doesn't really matter if people can't distinguish although you said some other things which maybe contradicted that, but anyway, you said whether decisions are taken at the national level or at the EU level. But we've got a problem, if I understood you right, it seems that we've got a problem which has been touched upon in this discussion of the lack of transparency at the EU level permitting national governments to blame Brussels for decisions which they themselves have actually supported. And it comes from Brussels as if it was something other. And it's in that context that it's very difficult to talk about Brussels. Now, I would identify, I work on transparency of the European Union pretty much 24 hours a day at the moment. And one of the problems is a lack of transparency which frustrates the possibility for civil society, for media, to really know what's going on in Brussels. Who concluded the EU-Turkey deal? Who is taking decisions inside the Council? We don't know often. And then we get involved in silly campaigns, frankly, to get the commissioners to publish their travel expenses, which used a huge amount of our resources. So far we've secured the publication of 2 months' worth of travel expenses after a 3-year campaign. Is there any wonder that people are blaming Brussels? It fits with a narrative, that resistance to transparency fits with a narrative of a corrupt elite that's running Europe that doesn't actually have an interest in the citizens. And when you see journalists being killed, a journalist killed for investigating spending of EU funds in Slovakia, and that's jumped upon in the debate in the European Parliament by all the anti-European elements to say, oh, look, it's just proof that Europe's corrupt, and when journalists try to investigate, they get killed. It's horrible to see. So that's the first part. My question is a reaction to that. And the second part is, it was mentioned what the languages that Euronews is available in. Fantastic. We're presenting a complaint to the European Ombudsman next week. We've mapped the websites of all the institutions and agencies to see in which languages it's possible to understand how to exercise your right of access to EU information. And all of them are violating the right to operate in all 24 languages. Most citizens, if you don't speak English, and maybe French or maybe German, you can't communicate with the European Union institutions. That's another problem. So there are some things that I'd like to hear a reaction about. How do we solve those in order to make the European Union appear more accessible and less remote? Thank you.
On the transparency, I think it's hugely important for the functioning of the EU itself to keep on pressing this case of increasing transparency, certainly in the Council. Absolutely. However, I'm not quite sure this is a campaignable topic. The problem is that people are getting a bit tired that one side quite often is saying, the national politicians say it's Brussels' fault, and then almost always the reaction of the Brussels politician is, no, but it was your fault. People are pointing at each other, and I think that's the politics where people think, I don't know anymore, and I don't care. They switch off. And that's the biggest danger, people switching off and just don't care anymore. And I think that's the problem with this issue, that people at a certain moment, they just don't know it anymore, and then, okay, I'll leave it. And it's only, that helps the picture that Europe is complicated, it just goes on, I have no idea, I have no grip on it, let it be. And then suddenly someone comes, no, we can also get out. Oh yeah, that might also be. And there you have the two tastes, right? So that's my problem. So yes, very important, but I have my doubts on whether it's campaignable. What I think is that it is so important that at a certain moment when you have political discussions, that people then are interested in, oh, but how was it decided? And then transparency should help you in knowing how it was decided. But you do it through that angle. So the transparency is very important to make sure that once people get interested, they also can follow how it worked. But you first get them interested in the topics, not in the transparency of it by itself. That would be my take on it.
But how do you get them interested if there isn't enough information to really know what's
That's why I say that. That's why I say that it's an important fight, but not necessarily a campaignable thing to start your European campaign for the European elections tomorrow with. That's my point.
On languages? So maybe on languages, how are we fighting language barriers? As you might know, in each member state we do have a representation of the European Commission to communicate in the national language to the citizens. Also, we do have an entire network of European direct information centers, 13 in Croatia, so on the national, regional and local level, to be as close as possible to the citizens in the national language. Plus, we have a number of, on a daily basis publications in Croatian and daily news in Croatian. So, yes, languages are barriers and it is a challenge, but it's all proportional with the resources that we have. So, I mean, if we don't have enough resources, we cannot, broadcast Euronews in all languages. Voila, so we're managing somehow to a certain extent. I do assume that it's not enough, but we'll explore further how to, again, face those barriers.
Are there more questions?
Yeah. To Mr. Affronte, regarding Italy, because I'm Italian. So a specific question regarding the way that fake news is affecting Italy. I think regarding the parties that are going against Europe in this period, and that are actually gaining and have already gained support from a big part of the population that is sick of politics and political debate. How can Europe and members of the European Parliament, Italian members of the European Parliament, start a debate and find solutions to fight against fake news and fake sites that are spreading all over Facebook and all over the social media and are really badly affecting the way people see Europe and the way people misunderstand solutions that are made for Europeans? I don't know if it's a clear question.
I need 40 minutes around. No,
or at least have we started a debate on that?
Yes.
Italians, not Europe, because Italians are really...
No. There is a debate on this, at least at the European level. But I think that at the European level we have not realized how much of a problem it is. And in the last Italian election, I'm not talking about just fake news. I'm talking about this kind of very rude communication, like very short messages, also fake news, but also some building different truths that you can use. It depends on what people you have in front of. This kind of, that's why in the beginning I was so frustrated when I said I try to talk about content, I try to sell my content, to sell my idea, and the other ones shut slogans and nothing more. The results of this, of course, we have it under our eyes, because if I say so, 50% of people in the last election voted for populist. I don't like a lot this word, but anyway, we can simplify the things like this. And I don't want to go too far, also because I would enter also the discussion about the Five-Star Movement. I was there for 7 years, and I left the Five-Star Movement also because this kind of communication, also because a lack of internal democracy and many things that I don't like in that party. And now this is the most important party in Italy. They have 32%. So yes, in Europe we started this kind of discussion. I think that we are at the very beginning, and also I remember a speech of Matteo Salvini in the European Parliament saying that, are you crazy people? You are here discussing Facebook and fake news when people is dying for poverty, when migrants are invading Europe and something like this. This is, again, I need the help of the media to combat this kind of instrument. They have a very strong instrument at the moment, and I don't have the same instrument. I don't know how to face this kind of challenge.
Perhaps Jukka can help.
First of all, thank you for that question. It's hugely important. To start with, the national parliament or European Union and the media and the PR people, it's not a closed circle. The fake news are here to stay because it's the greatest business on this planet. You don't need any money and you can make really good money in a very short time. It's not going anywhere. The only solution I see is that make your children as educated in school as possible. And the way I see it, when I look at my kids that are 10 and 13, they already know that if you click something, it's just stuff. Yeah. But I'm more concerned about. Yeah. Oh, all right. I'll be there next week. But I'm more concerned about grown-ups, about mid-aged people, because we are more in the kindergarten of social media, and it seems that the 10 or 20-year-olds they're in high school of social media. So I just would educate children, and they will then tell their parents that, hey, you're dumb. But also, it's really important when you mention media itself, the EU critical people see the traditional media houses as part of the problem. So we have to kind of tackle the whole issue upside down. Ask people more, what kind of content do you want to create? And other thing is that is highly important is that fake news is the word of a year right now. everyone talks about fake news. It's really important to define what is fake. Fake is something that is 100% not true. Fake news is not something that doesn't fit my liberal worldview. And I've seen this coming, because fake news is used so much these days that the definition of fake starts to evaporate and it becomes political, like fact-checking got political in the US election in 2016. Fact-checking was liberal. Everyone was fact-checking that Trump is lying. What do you got? You got the media with the reputation that, oh yeah, this is the East Coast liberal media. But we're going to be screwed for a year or two, but it's going to be better thanks to our children. And thank you for bringing that issue up.
Yeah, I just had also Rima who wanted to react. You perhaps shortly, or yeah, okay. Then first the question.
I'm curious also of hearing Croatia, because I think it's closer to Italian situation
and Finland
than Holland and Netherlands and Finland. Really, really another world for me, at least. And also later on, I would like to also hear from you if you're optimistic about the future. If you think this tendency will start to improve towards, thanks to young people, because I don't know. I'm from the north of Italy, and in the north of Italy, young people are pretty well educated on this topic, but I don't know, maybe in other parts of Italy they're not. Not Calabria only.
Just the entire south.
Okay, so perhaps first Rima, and then we go back to Marco.
So yes, indeed, we Croatians are very much, like the Italians, we have a similar mentality. We don't have necessarily a similar culture, but we are very much like you. And fake news in Croatia also is a big deal. However, it's now it's becoming clear actually for everyone what is fake news, and that is playing a big role in the public debate. And people are getting more cautious. Educating kids, absolutely, but educating adults as much. It's necessary. We cannot wait for our kids to grow up, because it will be another context, there will be another challenges, but we need to educate the entire public, ourselves first, and then everyone else. Everyone at the same time. When we talk about, again, social media and traditional media, I'm not very fond of statistics, but I think that I've read a Eurobarometer report lately who said that the trust of the public in the traditional media is higher than the trust in the social media. Because in the social media, you don't necessarily have a debate. You have reactions. You have, bitterness, anger, frustration, but not necessarily a debate, where actually the traditional news, they give you a platform with analysis, report, feedback, information. What's lacking is the two-way communication, which is a plus for the social media. So again, we cannot exclude any of it. We now have a choice, too many choices maybe. And democracy is becoming more complex to consume, because people, for instance, for the Commission, they perceive it as a service that delivers results. But now they want choices. Citizens want to make choices with the institution. They don't want the institution to make choices for them. So they do have all the platforms and all the methods to co-decide, but paradoxically they don't. They don't have the time, they don't have the willingness, they don't have the hunger, the appetite for it. So, or it depends again from one topic to another. So traditional media is still playing its role, I think.
So our time is also almost over already, but so Bas wanted to react, and then we go back to Marco that she can still answer the question on Italy.
Time flies when you're having fun, right? I hope that's also for you guys. But maybe I just want to react to you saying that, you know, that Italy, Croatia might be different than Netherlands or Finland. Yes, there are differences, but this debate is everywhere. And every country is struggling with it. So really, don't think we in the Netherlands don't have a huge debate about fake news and still are having difficulties how to deal with that. I think one thing that we have to realize is that fake news has been around always. It's not a new thing. What is new is now, thanks to social media, it became a profit-making tool. So it accelerated a lot, but it has been around. Just read the British tabloids, I would say, and I would say you can have a lot of fun with fake news. So it is not, but of course we have now, because it accelerated so hugely and so fastly, there we have to get around with. I think why you are getting a bit dissatisfied with the answer of Jukka, you know, it's education, education, education. It's because it feels a bit like, yeah, but that will take very long and the problem is now. But I fear it's the only right answer that we have, because think of the alternative, that we politically are going to do something about it. Then you are going to give the politicians the right to decide what is fake news. Well, I would say that's a problem, because we are in America, we have one president who is telling what is fake news, and here we say, oh, but he's not right, but who knows? So really politicians giving the right to say what is fake and not, and then what? Can they then forbid to tell fake news? In the end, this needs to be a societal development where the society itself can harness itself and deal with fake news in the way it is done. That's the only way, and maybe in one country it takes longer than in another country, but any other faster option is probably not what I would like to see, because it's giving too powerful tools to politicians, which I don't trust them to.
About Italy. No. I want to be optimistic, and I will say so because I think that when you play the game that the populists played in the last electoral campaign, you can do it for a short period of time. You can do it forever, because you can say something and say the day after the contrary of what you said the day before. You can follow the belly of the people and not the mind of the people, but when you have to confront with decision that has to be taken, then you have to show your card, the card that you have in your hands. So I don't know what will happen with this, the Italian government. I think that we will know it in a couple of weeks. But some of them will be at the government, and they must start to work, and they have to take decision. So it's different to say we will do this, and it's completely different to do it when you are at the government. And also, if you build your ride on the fear of people, you win. We saw this, but then you have to provide solution of this fear when you have the occasion. If you are not, then the other time the people will bring their fear somewhere else. And this is not good, of course, because I'm saying that we are building our political discussion or our political options on fears, but the last part of the great part of the last election electoral campaign was based on this. So I am optimistic because they have to confront with themselves, with their decision, with their idea of government, so the people will see what they have in hands or not. But I want to add also that we need, in this case, Europe to work and to fight and to challenge some of this fear, because if in 2 or 3 years Europe, for example, didn't take a strong decision about migrants, let's say so, in a couple of years, in 3 years, we will have someone else that will run the horse of migrants like a fear to raise votes, to raise up. So I want to be optimistic, but also we need the Europe to make some strong decision to help us to bring something different, because next time we will have someone else that will say the same thing that this time was saying by Lega or Five Star Movement.
Thank you. So as I said, we are almost at the end. Can we have like 15 seconds each with the one thing to improve communication on Europe? You were talking about 7 seconds, so you should be able to do it in 15.
Do your thing. Okay.
We are more, as a media house, we are more and more interested about the people that are not interested. And that should be our primary target in the coming years. And I would like to have people on the audience and in the panel explaining how they see the world, because the answer lies there.
In 15 seconds, I would say, don't leave the criticism on how the EU is functioning right now to the Eurosceptics only. Because if you do that, then Europe will lose out. That's my most simple, and there the responsibility lies with the politicians first, and then the journalists will do their stories around it, and then you get your public debate. But it's the politicians first. Don't shy away from that.
I think that we should bring back the EU values in the debate, in the EU debate. We forget actually what are our EU values. We take them for granted, especially the new generation. And this we need to remind day in, day out, what are our EU values. We need to bring this back to the debate.
You mentioned the young people in your question. I think that it's interesting to reach people that are not interested, but also we have to build a lot on young people. And I think creating the occasion to meet young people will help us in the future, because in this case we will have people more sensitive and more prepared to face the new challenges, and also with a different idea of Europe that is one that we have in mind.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for you for listening. So we still have a year, so let's work on it. Thanks a lot.